4. There are 7 question types on the 2026 PMP exam, and 4 of them only exist if you sit it in a test centre. Choose to test at home and you will never meet those 4, not once. And one of the 7 isn't really a question format at all. It's closer to being handed a tool and asked to use it.
Hey everyone, Erica here. 3 of the 7 run everywhere. Multiple choice with 1 right answer, multiple response with several, and the case scenarios we took apart last time.
We've spent this series on what the exam asks. Today it's how it asks, because the shape of a question changes how you can attack it.
This is Leo, and the other 4 are the visual ones. Point and click, matching, enhanced matching, and pull-down lists. All 4 are center only.
Which produces something genuinely odd. 2 people can hold the same credential having answered structurally different exams.
Same content outline, same 26 tasks, same passing standard, different interaction surface.
And before anybody decides that makes the home exam easier, it doesn't. Fewer formats is not fewer questions. You still answer 180 in 240 minutes.
What it changes is what your practice needs to cover. If you're going to a center, 4 formats you've probably never seen in a practice app are waiting for you.
There's a cost on the home side that nobody mentions either, and it isn't about formats. The outline warns that online proctored exams require system tests and an extensive check-in process, and tells you to allow time before the exam to get through them.
So the center costs you a drive and 4 unfamiliar formats. Home costs you a technical gauntlet on the morning of, before you've answered anything.
Neither one is free. They just charge you differently, and knowing which bill you'd rather pay is genuinely part of preparing. Leo has been the loudest voice in the room on this one all week, so he should ask it.
Loud is fair, here it is, and it's the thing nobody has a clean answer for. How do you practice a format you cannot access? And there is a decision hiding in all of this that most people make by accident. They pick a venue on convenience in the week they book, months before they ever learn that 4 question formats hang off that choice.
Which is backwards. The venue decides your practice plan, so it belongs at the start of your study rather than the end of it. And it's worth being clear about what does not change. The passing standard is identical either way, and so are the 26 tasks. Nobody gets an easier bar for meeting fewer formats.
So that's the split. 3 formats everywhere, 4 behind a test center door, and a surface most people have never touched. Let's take the 4 apart one at a time, one thing before the next part, and then we move right on. If any of this is clicking, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for the next one. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you would think. Start with the one that unsettles people most, because it removes the single technique every candidate relies on.
Elimination. You cannot eliminate a hotspot. There's nothing sitting there to cross out.
Professor Okonkwo is at the desk for this.
Almost, though I would put it more sharply. Elimination is not merely unavailable, it is the wrong instinct entirely. A point-and-click item is an image with hidden hotspot areas, and you identify the correct areas by clicking the correct locations. The answer set is invisible until you commit.
So a network diagram, a Gantt chart, an organization chart. Something with regions on it that mean different things.
Precisely. And the skill it tests is not recognition, it is location. Knowing that the critical path is the longest duration path through a network is recognition. Being able to put your finger on it in an unfamiliar diagram is location, and those are different competencies.
Which is why people who can recite every formula still freeze on these. They learned the sentence, not the shape.
And think about which diagrams the outline's own tasks would put in front of you. A network diagram when the ask is about the critical path. A burn down when it's about velocity. A power and interest grid when it's about stakeholder classification.
Each of those is a picture of a task you have already studied. That is the reassuring half of this. The content is not new. Only the demand on your eye is new.
And there's no partial credit for clicking near the right place. You either found it or you didn't.
So how do you practice finding things in a diagram?
Draw. Take any diagram in your study material, cover the labels, and point to what is being asked for. A network diagram with the float hidden. a burn down with the point of divergence hidden. You are training your eye to find structure without captions.
That's the first genuinely usable answer I've heard to that question.
Professor Okonkwo, thank you. Recognition versus location is the distinction I'll be repeating.
And it works on the walk to the kitchen. You don't need a desk for it.
Which matters more than it sounds, because the reason nobody drills these is that drilling them normally requires software nobody has. A pencil removes the excuse.
Cover the labels. That is the whole exercise.
Matching next, and the mechanics matter more than they sound. You drag items from the first column into the middle, matching them against what's in the third column.
So it's 3 columns, not 2. The middle is where your answer goes, and the outer 2 are the things being related.
And the exam loves this shape for anything that comes in a set. Conflict resolution approaches against situations. Contract types against risk positions. Agile ceremonies against their purpose.
Then there's enhanced matching, which is the same idea with pictures. The outline says these can include images or diagrams to clarify what's being matched, and you might drag a box to a specific spot on a chart.
Which is point and click and matching having a child. You need the location skill and the pairing knowledge at the same time.
And here's the trap that makes these expensive. On a matching set, a single wrong pair doesn't cost you 1 pairing.
It takes a second one with it, because the item you misplaced was the right answer somewhere else.
Exactly that. Errors come in pairs on a matching question, which is why the ones you're confident about should go down first, and the doubtful ones last.
Take a concrete one. 5 conflict handling approaches on the left. 5 short situations on the right. Collaborate, compromise, withdraw, smooth, force.
And you'll know 2 of those cold, because collaborate and force are unmistakable. Place them. Now 3 approaches remain for 3 situations, and the field just got small enough to reason about.
Whereas if you start with the ambiguous middle 3, you'll burn 4 minutes and still be guessing.
Place what you know. Let the remaining slots narrow the field for what you don't. It's the same discipline as a Sudoku, and it works for the same reason.
Erica, that reframing is going to help people more than the format description did.
And practicing it needs no software at all. Write 8 terms on one side of a page, 8 definitions on the other, shuffle, and pair them cold under a timer. One more mechanical detail people trip on. Because you're dragging rather than clicking a letter, an unplaced item looks identical to a wrong one on your screen. There's no blank to notice.
So sweep the whole item before you leave it. Count the slots, count what you placed, and make those 2 numbers match.
And before we get to the last 2 formats, hold on to that word cascade, because it comes back in a nastier form. At the top I said one of the 7 isn't really a question format. Before we get there, the simplest of the 4, which is also the sneakiest.
Pull-down lists. You select the correct answer from a drop-down. That's the entire description.
Professor Okonkwo, back to you.
The description is simple and the item is not. A drop-down hides its options until you open it, so you cannot scan the answer space the way you would a lettered list. You commit to opening one before you know what else was available.
And they rarely come alone. You get a sentence with 2 or 3 drop-downs in it, and the choices interact.
Which is the cascade your colleague flagged earlier in its nastier form. Choose one value in the first drop-down and you have constrained what can be true in the second. Candidates answer them left to right as if they were independent. They are not.
So read the whole sentence with all the blanks first. Decide what the finished sentence has to say, then fill it in.
Now the last one, and this is the one I said isn't really a question. The outline describes practicum hands-on testing that may include tools, data, and case study questions.
Hands-on, with tools, on a project management exam.
It is the clearest signal in the whole outline about where this credential is going. They are no longer satisfied that you can identify the correct action. They want evidence you can perform it against real data.
And nobody can tell you exactly what that looks like yet, which is the honest position. What we can tell you is what it costs.
Minutes. An item where you manipulate something takes longer than an item where you recognize something, and your 80-second average was built on the recognizing kind.
so bank time early on the formats you're fast at. You'll spend it here. One more thing about the hands-on items, and it's a fairness question people are already asking. If those run on tools, does everybody get the same ones?
The outline does not say, and I will not invent an answer. What it does say is that this testing may include tools, data, and case study questions, and that the case portion runs on every modality. Beyond that, the honest position is that we are describing a format nobody outside PMI has fully seen yet.
Which is worth saying plainly rather than filling with a guess. Anybody telling you exactly what the practicum items look like is telling you something they cannot know.
Professor Okonkwo, thank you. Reading the whole sentence before touching a single drop-down is the tactic I'd hand somebody testing tomorrow.
Decide the sentence, then fill it. Never the reverse.
So back to Leo's question because it deserves a real answer rather than a shrug. How do you practice a format you can't get your hands on?
You practice the underlying skill instead of the interface. The interface is the part you'll figure out in the tutorial. The skill is what takes weeks.
Which is genuinely reassuring, because the drag and drop mechanics are about 90 seconds of learning. Nobody fails because they couldn't operate a mouse.
So for hotspots, cover the labels. Take every diagram in your material and point at what's being asked for with the captions hidden. Network diagrams, burn-downs, power and interest grids, organization charts.
For matching 8 terms on one side of a page and 8 definitions on the other, shuffled, paired cold, under a clock, and place the confident ones first.
For pull-downs, read the finished sentence before you open anything. Decide what it has to say, then go fill the gaps.
And for the hands-on items, the honest advice is time rather than technique. Nobody knows the exact shape yet, so build slack instead of confidence.
Picture Daniel Reyes, a program lead with 11 years on utilities projects, who tested at a center after 8 weeks in an app that only ever served him lettered multiple choice. His first matching item took him 6 minutes, not because he didn't know the material, because he'd never once had to place anything.
6 minutes on one item out of 240 for 180. That's the cost of an unfamiliar surface.
And it's avoidable with a pencil and a piece of paper, which is the frustrating part.
One honest caveat before we close, because there's a real fork here. If you're testing at home, none of the 4 visual formats will reach you, and drilling them hard is time you could have spent on the content instead.
So who should drill them? Anyone booked into a center, obviously. And anyone still undecided because the cost of preparing for them and not needing them is small, and the reverse is not.
And there's a version of this that helps whichever route you take. Every one of these formats is asking you to relate things to each other rather than recall them in isolation. Terms to definitions, regions to meanings, values to a sentence.
So the study habit that pays across all 7 is relating, not listing. Stop making flashcards with 1 fact on them, and start making cards that put 2 things side by side.
Leo, that's the most transferable thing said in this episode, and it costs nothing to switch to. If one thing survives today, make it this. The visual formats test whether you can locate and place what you know, not whether you can recognize it, and you can train that with paper.
Which nobody wants to hear and which works.
If the format side of this exam is where you feel least prepared, subscribing keeps the rest of the technique series coming as we build it, and it costs you nothing. So tell me before you go, are you booked into a center? And had you even heard of Hotspot questions before today? Go cover some labels. This is Isabella, and I'll see you in the next one.